This presentation is all about the Information and Communication Technology System upgrade and the Voice over Internet Protocol or VoIP phone installation done at the St. James Municipal Corporation. This presentation will focus on the following sections: the scope of the project, the procurement process, issues identified, controlling of the project, recommendations, and finally, lessons learned. Getting into our first section, the scope of the project. The phone system, as it existed, used old technology and required a monthly payment to retain its service. Upgrading it to use the VoIP technology means that calls are now going to be made using an internet connection. This would ultimately lead to the company saving money over time. On initial inspection, however, the ICT infrastructure as it existed was inadequate and needed to be upgraded in order to facilitate the phones. The scope now, therefore, is to upgrade the ICT infrastructure and install the VoIP telephone system. How did we go about this? That brings us to our next section, the procurement process. Being a government entity, when accessing the services of an outside company, the procurement has to follow certain guidelines. Some of these are listed below, and in the same breath, these serves as a rationale for selecting both vendor and phones. Some things that we had to ensure was present. The vendors had to have the necessary license. Just the same, they had to have a track record, a proven track record. This would demonstrate their ability to fulfill the core functions of the system and to install the necessary features that are requested. Just the same, the Cisco phones were chosen because of ease of implementation and management, and it was more competitively priced in relation to the product offering. Were these installed without issues? No. Two issues that were identified. Now, upgrading the ICT system means that several things would need to be updated as well. This is one of the areas that gave the project team some issues. The domain name server, synonymous with a phone book, stores the location of connected devices on the network. Each of these devices are issued an Internet Protocol address, and these IP addresses are then stored in the DNS server. Some errors occurred here, and what that meant was that the connected devices became unstable. The stability was affected. This is to the extent where the server was not able to locate the particular device, or some of the functions of the devices weren't working properly. The second issue, much like the first, was software incompatibility. New hardware, new environment or operating system, same productivity application. What this means is that, and as it pertains to softwares, once old softwares are put in a new environment, it is highly likely there will be interruptions due in part to old code within the software that would need to be updated before the software can run fully. This is, in most times, easily resolved, but in one instance, a software was no longer being supported and as a result needed to be changed. Employees came to work the following week, and while the new phones were a pleasant surprise, they were disgruntled because a printer here was not functioning or their softwares were crashing, signaling that their workflow that they had worked so hard on and that they were so much used to had been interrupted. Moving into our next section, project control. We will speak to controlling the project scope, controlling the project cost. Also, we will control the project schedule and the project communication and procurement. Now, these were easily controlled as it pertains to the project cost and the project schedule. The contract would have listed out all that needed to be done where this was concerned. The project schedule was there for 1 week. So 1 week after project start, then the project should have been completed. When it came on to project communication, progress updates were done in writing and they were given to the head of the department, the Information and Communication Technology Department. As it concerns procurement, the government procurement guidelines presided. Moving on to recommendations, the next 2 slides list the recommendations. 1. Effective communication is effective to the success of every project. These changes must be reflected in the organization charts and stakeholder registers to establish project relationships. And recommendation number 2, the use of tools and techniques such as forecasts and variances are important to determine the adjustments that are needed to project costs, scope, and schedule for the successful completion of the project. The slides list other recommendations, and so we'll move on to our next section, the lessons learned, the most important section. For the first lesson learned, it is important to have proper communication between stakeholders and project teams. Had there been effective communication strategies in place, then it would have lessened the frustration of staff and allowed for contingency plans to be put in place to negate unproductive work hours. And the next most important lesson that was learned, controlling the project scope, cost, and schedule. It is very important. Now, with the preparation of the contract for service, the corporation was able to define what the end product should be, including specifications of the devices and how they should operate, including call waiting, log of missed calls, and the capability to access the corporation's new telephone directory and video conferencing softwares. This contract also reduced the likelihood of additional costs being introduced while the project was underway. These are some of our references. So we have reference slide number 1, reference slide number 2. This project was done by the following members: Andre Grant, Vikas Grant, Nicole White, and Kenisha Leverett. We thank you very much for your listening ear. Thank you.